Hello, people of Earth, and hello, Murray Griffin. How are you doing?
Hello, Francisca Curran. It's been another big week. I'm doing pretty well. What was your take on the highlight of the week?
Well, Murray, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole looking into the Goombie Renewable Energy Hub, which last week there was an agreement finalised between the Western Downs Regional Council and Goombie Energy Holdings around a community benefit agreement, which is
Yep.
now a new requirement. And I found that really cool. There's a little fact sheet that's been put out where you can see all the headline numbers of, how the consultation process has gone and what the positive and negative impacts of the project are, and then also how these funding streams are going to work for the community.
Yeah, that was a really interesting agreement, definitely. And with Western Downs Regional Council in Queensland. And one of the first, actually, I think it's the second agreement that's been finalised with the council since the new requirements that apply to large-scale renewable energy projects that are seeking environmental approval. One of the first agreements that's come into play up there. And it was really interesting seeing where the money would go. What did you make of it?
Yeah, well, the community benefit agreement covers $30 million across the 35-year life of the project. So quite a significant investment, which will go through what looks like 3 different funding streams, including building council infrastructure, so improving the waste and landfill, as well as community sponsorship, so community grants to local clubs and groups and organisations, as well as community infrastructure.
Yeah, well, which is going to be really good for that for the people who live in that region. And it did make me wonder. Well, I wonder what because there's I think there's quite a lot of pop coal and coal seam gas projects in that area as well. I wonder what they've ever coughed up, and I'd be kind of surprised if it was a good a deal as they're going to get out of this renewable energy project. And this is just the first cab off the rank, isn't it? Apparently, I think there are others that are under negotiation by that same council.
Yes, so it will be really interesting to see what happens from there. But I found that really a bit inspiring, a bit exciting, of sort of regional economic development alongside a large renewable energy project. I think the wind farm itself will have 800 megawatt capacity with over 107 wind turbines.
Yeah, so I must say, it did make me think, look, if you live in a regional area, there are not that many companies or that many organisations that are going to be knocking on your door offering you 35 million over 30 years. So, yeah, very exciting to see. I agree.
Very cool. And Murray, what stood out to you this week?
Well, I'm in a bit of a rut because last week I was talking about environmental legislation, and this week I want to do the same thing because my pick of the week is an announcement by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese that the Australian government will spend more than $45 million to finalise agreements with states and territories that will allow states and territories to environmentally assess and approve projects on behalf of the Australian government. Now, this is a big deal, not so much because of the money. It's a big deal because quite a few governments have tried over more than a decade, along with many industry associations, they've tried to get these environmental approval agreements off the ground, but they've always only partly succeeded. They've succeeded to the degree that the Australian government has signed agreements that let states and territories assess projects on its behalf, and these are called EPBC Act, Environmental Assessment Bilateral Agreements, after the federal environment law that's known as the EPBC Act. But now the Prime Minister is saying, nope, that's not enough. We're going to go further and let states and territories approve projects on our behalf as well. And one important thing to note about this is that states and territories will have to follow the framework set out in the EPBC Act, the reformed EPBC Act, including the new national environmental standards that will be issued under that Act. So that creates even more pressure to get these standards right.
Murray, last week we heard about the MOU between Federal Environment Minister Murray Watt and the WA Premier around EPBC Act bilateral approval. How does this extend on that?
Well, I think I think that WA Memorandum of Understanding is sort of the first sort of step towards an agreement with a state or territory. And
First
so
cab off the rank with others to
cab
follow.
off the rank, yeah. And I would be very surprised if Western Australia isn't the first state to get an environmental assessment agreement locked in and an environmental approval agreement locked in. And one of the interesting things will be to see what happens with Queensland, because Queensland is the Queensland government is up in arms about the aspects of the EPBC Act reforms, as we'll hear a bit later on. But, in the end, they are going to want a bilateral agreement as well, an assessment and approval agreement. So it's hard to see them holding a very strong hand in terms of being critical of those reforms. Basically, I reckon, sooner or later, they'll just have to suck it up and say, okay, that's what we'll do. We'll stick to the requirements of the legislation, and we want our assessment and approval agreement, please. Yeah. Anyway, we'll just have to wait and see.
Interesting.
So we have a quiz question, don't we?
We do indeed. What do the region honeyeater and the southern right whale have in common? You'll have to keep listening for the answer.
Yes, you might think that's an unlikely, that wouldn't have much in common at all. And in many respects, they don't. But due to events this week, they do have one thing in common. And we'll tell you a bit later on.
So jumping in, and in other EPBC Act news, the federal government has released a revised draft EPBC National Environmental Standard on matters of national environmental significance. So the revised draft standard says unacceptable impacts on matters of national environmental significance, which are things like threatened species and threatened ecological communities, must be avoided. It also says that compensation that will result in a net gain must be provided for any residual significant impacts on these matters. The development of national environmental standards was a key recommendation in the 2020 review of the EPBC Act that led to last year's reforms, and they all play an incredibly important role in environmental decision-making. The standards will give businesses clear rules to follow, make sure decisions are made fairly and consistently, and a revised draft of a standard of environmental offsets is expected to be released shortly.
Staying with the EPBC Act, and Australia's Environment Minister Murray Watt has given a speech on the Great Barrier Reef, saying that one action that will result from the EPBC reforms will dramatically improve the quality of water flowing into the reef. The minister was referring to more stringent federal scrutiny of land clearing proposals in Queensland's reef catchment areas, a change that was introduced as part of the reforms. The Queensland government is not at all happy about those new requirements and has launched a Queensland Productivity Commission inquiry into them. But Minister Watt is unfazed, and he pointed out in his speech the importance of the Great Barrier Reef purely in economic terms. The reef has an estimated value of $95 billion and directly supports 77,000 jobs, which makes it Australia's fifth biggest employer. As Minister Watt said, the figures are a powerful reminder of what's on the line economically when it comes to protecting the Great Barrier Reef.
The comment about the Great Barrier Reef being Australia's fifth biggest employer also reminds me and plugs into the national ecosystem accounts that we heard were released a couple of weeks ago about quantifying, the economic contribution of nature. And I feel this is just another clear message of that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's reflected in other reef news this week, where the federal government has awarded $15 million over 5 years, 4 different projects that will protect wetlands across Great Barrier Reef catchments under what is called the ReefWise Wetlands Program. These projects will revegetate mangroves and restore natural flow patterns. The projects will also restore low-lying, degraded agricultural and pastoral lands to manage erosion and prevent runoff. They will also target feral pigs and invasive weeds. So that's an exciting development.
It is indeed. And feral pigs will also be in the sights of a round of turtle protection projects. The Australian and Queensland governments have awarded a total of $820,000 to 7 organisations to protect protect and boost turtle populations. The Queensland coast is home to some of the most important marine turtle nesting and feeding sites in the world, and 6 of the world's 7 marine turtle species nest there, all of which are considered threatened due to climate change, habitat loss, and predation of eggs by introduced pests like feral pigs.
Loving the investment in reefs and nature and
Yeah, I know,
and
it's
turtles.
good. And see, the Queensland and federal governments can cooperate in getting rid of feral pigs, which is no small thing.
No, not at all. But in other positive news from Queensland, the Queensland government has declared the state's 3rd Special Wildlife Reserve in an area southwest of Mount Isa. The Pillinger Special Wildlife Reserve is owned by Bush Heritage Australia and has now become Queensland's 3rd Special Wildlife Reserve. The declaration means that the area is permanently protected from other land uses such as mining. Pillinger supports migratory waterbirds and has one of the world's most diverse reptile communities. In July 2021, the Wankamudla people's rights over the area were formally recognised in a native title determination, and the reserve then became known as Pillinger. And Bush Heritage Australia has prepared a management plan to guide conservation activities across the reserve in close consultation with the Wankamudla community.
In a new speech, Climate Change Authority Chair Matt Keane has pointed out that a rapid transition to electric vehicles would do much more to boost Australia's energy security than building a new oil refinery. According to Matt Keane, building a conventional refinery would take almost a decade and would add petrol output equivalent to only a modest share, around 1/6 of national demand. But if instead we took steps to encourage half of all new car purchases over the next 10 years to be purchases of EVs, which is something that could be done, that would steadily and permanently cut demand for imported oil. In fact, Matt Keane said that over the decade, that could cut petrol demand by about 1/3.
New data from the Australian Energy Market Operator shows something very exciting, that renewable generation reached a record for the first 3 months of any year, supplying 47% of the national electricity market grid. And mostly for that reason, the average wholesale electricity price across the NEM fell 12% year on year in the quarter. Batteries, big and small, are having a big impact too, and they are changing how electricity is produced, consumed, and priced across the day. And large batteries are helping to moderate prices in high demand periods by absorbing excess renewable energy during the day and shifting it to the market during evening peaks.
And speaking of batteries, the latest data on Australia's Cheaper Home Batteries program shows more than 350,000 households, small businesses and community organisations have now installed batteries with the support of the scheme. About half of them have installed new or upgraded solar systems at the same time. And this isn't just an inner city trend. New postcode level data shows about 77% of the uptake has occurred in regional and outer suburban areas.
Staying with household energy upgrades, we all know that heat pump hot water systems can be much more efficient than other types of hot water systems. And that matters because water heating accounts for about a quarter of household energy use. But we've probably also heard some horror stories of shonky heat pump hot water systems. Now, Australia's E3 Energy Efficiency and Ratings program plans to tackle the problem by setting performance standards and mandating energy labelling requirements. The E3 program has also released a regulatory impact statement that sums up the costs and benefits of introducing the standards and labelling requirements, and they're impressive. It estimates the introduction of performance standards and mandatory labelling will have net benefits of $689 million out to 2040. Performance standards would also result in cumulative reductions in greenhouse gas emissions of 1.5 million tonnes.
In other household energy upgrade news, new data shows the Australian Government's Household Energy Upgrades Fund has helped finance energy upgrades in more than 4,100 homes since it started in May 2024. The fund is partly backed by the government's Clean Energy Finance Corporation, and it provides discounted finance products to help householders upgrade their homes with items such as energy-efficient appliances, PV systems, batteries, EV chargers, and double-glazed windows.
Very cool. Staying with households, and the Australian government is providing an additional $14.6 million under its Social Housing Energy Performance Initiative to do energy upgrade work in about 1,200 social housing properties in Tasmania. Work can include double glazing, electric heat pump hot water systems, thermal insulation, and LED lighting. The Australian government program known as SHEPI, SHEPI, is a $1.1 billion national scheme in which the federal government aims to work with states and territories to deliver energy performance upgrades to 100,000 public and community homes. The federal and Tasmanian governments have previously committed $8.3 million each under the program for energy upgrades to 1,700 properties.
In other news that will affect household energy bills, but maybe not in the way you might think, the Australian Energy Regulator has approved Victoria's 5 electricity distribution businesses to raise more money via electricity bills to carry out various works over the years to 2031. The regulator said Victoria's energy market is undergoing a complex transition with changes in household and commercial energy use, new loads such as data centres and increased focus on resilience due to bushfires and severe weather. But even though the distribution businesses will collect more money from householders, the regulator estimates the Victorian householders will see an annual fall in the distribution component of their electricity bills. The fall is likely to be between $6 and $38 for each year out to 2031. The reason is that the forecast higher demand for electricity will result in costs being shared among more customers.
Before we go on, just a reminder to sign up to the Earth newsletter. If you're interested in climate, nature, and sustainability news, it's free and it covers all the things that we talked about today and more. And by supporting the Earth newsletter, you can support our podcast too. There's also some big renewable news in Western Australia related to the Australian government's support scheme for big clean energy projects, which is known as the Capacity Investment Scheme, or the CIS. The first federal capacity investment scheme auction rounds for WA's Western energy market has resulted in 7 generation projects with a total capacity of 1.9 gigawatts receiving offers of CIS support. 6 of the projects are wind farms. The Capacity Investment Scheme auction has also resulted in support for 3 battery projects in the WEM, in the Western Energy Market, with a total capacity of 482 megawatts. The successful projects represent a total of $5 billion in new energy infrastructure investment. They will create 7,000 construction jobs and 500 ongoing maintenance jobs in WA's wheat belt, Midwest, Peel and Southwest regions. Project developers have offered to pay a total of more than $1.1 billion in host community benefits, as well as $894.8 million in benefits for host First Nation communities. They will also purchase Australian steel worth $1.1 billion. The successful projects will generate enough electricity to power more than 1 million WA households and will provide enough dispatchable storage capacity to support more than 400,000 households for 4 hours during peak demand. Australia's Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen says the successful projects would deliver the biggest electricity boost in Western Australia's history. And just by way of background, the Capacity Investment Scheme isn't a grant scheme. Instead, successful projects receive payments up to a certain level if their revenue falls below an agreed floor, and make payments to the federal government if their revenue goes above an agreed ceiling.
The Western Australian Government has also announced new support for large-scale clean energy projects in the state. The state government says it will establish a $1.4 billion clean energy fund as part of this year's state budget. The fund will support projects including the components of the state's Clean Energy Link scheme. The 2 parts of Clean Energy Link, CEL North and CEL East, will deliver 3 gigawatts of renewable energy and will create about 800 local jobs during the construction phase. CEL North is on track for completion late next year, while CEL East will be online by the end of 2029.
In New South Wales parliamentary news, a committee inquiry into waste-to-energy facilities has scheduled a public forum in Goulburn to be held on Thursday. And a Legislative Assembly committee has released a report on the impact of water buybacks in the Murray-Darling Basin.
In other New South Wales news, for the first time in more than a decade, the state government is inviting applications for fossil gas exploration licences in 2 areas in New South Wales far west. The state government will also slash gas exploration licence application fees from $50,000 to $1,000. Maybe we should
Interesting.
We
That's
could
quite a
apply for a
discount.
license, Francisco. It's getting into the affordable range for households.
Was there any explanation or logic that came with that announcement?
Yes, because predictions are that there is the possibility of a gas shortfall in New South Wales
Shortfall.
several years down the track. So they just want to do whatever they can to avoid that happening.
Alrighty. Well, what do you know about antimony? Well, it's a critical mineral and its main use is to harden lead in storage batteries, and it is increasingly being used in the semiconductor industry. Victoria has the world's third largest deposits of antimony, and it is now inviting grants for the early stage development of downstream antimony processing facilities in the state. Grants totaling $1 million are available. And we can thank Victoria's gold mining heritage for the knowledge of the state's antimony deposits, because antimony is usually found in the same quartz veins that often contain gold.
There you go. Who knew?
Interesting.
I wasn't even sure how to pronounce antimony, but
I hope I did it right.
no, I'm sure that's correct.
As we prepare for the antimony rush of Victoria, sorry.
Exactly. So now we know how to say it and where to find it. There's some very good news from South Australia. Water testing results show the vast majority of South Australia's coastline is continuing to record zero or low levels of the algae species that recently caused massive deaths of marine life. The majority of testing sites have now consistently recorded zero or low levels of the algae since the start of February.
That is fantastic news.
It is great news, isn't it?
Hey, Murray, are you an op shopper?
I am a bit of an op shopper. I've got to say, I'm pretty proud of my op shopping skills. Yeah.
Are you wearing anything from an op shop now?
Well, as it happens, I am. I went into a local op shop and there was, not that I'm a brand Nazi, but there was a Hugo Boss shirt there, brand new.
Fantastic.
And it had a $10 price tag on it. So I took it up to the counter and they said, "Oh, that seems a bit expensive. You can have it for $5." So that's that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I know.
Well, good on you, Murray.
Yeah.
I too am an op shopper. I was at one on Saturday, my favourite local one, and got some good bargains as well as we head into winter. But a new study, the reason I asked wasn't out of the blue, Murray, because our next news item is all about this. A new study in Western Australia has quantified the benefits of buying secondhand clothes and goods, and they stack up to a significant amount. The study, by Charitable Reuse Australia, in partnership with the WA Waste Authority, estimates charity and reuse organisations are allowing households to save about $245 million a year by buying secondhand. The savings are equivalent to about $200 for every WA household. The secondhand sector is also supporting more than 1,300 jobs and raises $42 million a year that is reinvested into social and community programs. It also allows households to avoid the consumption of 6,100 tonnes of virgin materials each year. And avoiding the use of virgin materials has a greenhouse gas benefit because extracting and processing virgin materials releases greenhouse gases.
Well, I mean, we're just going to feel so much better next time we go into an op shop, aren't we?
Absolutely. Very justified in my purchases.
What did you buy, by the way?
Several wintry things, a vest,
Yes.
a pink knitted vest, actually. This op shop is on Bribie Island and it's called Busy Fingers Op Shop.
Yes.
And it's just full of so much stuff, a very large one. It's bustling. You couldn't get a car park. I could get a car park at the beach, but I couldn't get a park in the op shop car park. On
That's
Saturday.
a sign
That's
of
what
success.
the long weekend did. It's definitely a sign of success.
Okay, so finally, let's circle back to the EPBC Act one more time and the answer to our quiz question. The Australian government has announced it will trial the development of EPBC Act protection statements for 5 species. Protection statements are a new tool under the EPBC Act that will set binding rules on how threatened plants, animals and ecological communities are to be protected. If a protection statement applies to a particular species or ecological community, it would replace any guidance contained in recovery plans and would become the main document for conserving that species or community. Protection statements don't require advice from the federal government's Threatened Species Scientific Committee, and that has made some environment groups nervous. But we're adopting a wait-and-see approach, and it will be very interesting to see what these first 5 statements look like. The 5 species chosen for the development of protection statements are the southern bent-wing bat, the pygmy blue-tongue lizard, the grand spider orchid, and the regent honeyeater and the southern right whale. So the common thread between the regent honeyeater and the southern right whale is that they're both going to be guinea pigs.
Of the protection statements.
Yes.
Murray, which is your, if you were one of these 5 species today, which one are you going into your day as?
I think, look, I got to say the whale. I
Good
think,
choice.
yeah, I think that would be the best choice. I think honeyeaters, they look incredibly busy. I think they're kind of on the go the whole time. And, a grand spider orchid probably doesn't see much of the world. Yeah, so not keen on being a
I'm
bat or a
choosing the
lizard.
pygmy blue-tongue lizard, though.
Really?
The
Really?
lizard is, yeah. I've not seen one in real life, but I did do a little Google, and they are adorable and little, and do have a little blue tongue.
Right.
And
So they live
soaking
up
up
to
the
their
last
name.
rays of summer
Yeah.
is what I would. Yeah, they're little and blue long. Yeah.
I would say they get to
Fun.
chill out, except that's probably not appropriate language really for a reptile. But yeah, I get what you mean. They get to take it easy. But yeah, no, I just like no, I'm not budging from the southern right whale. I think that would be
Well, Murray, if you scroll right down to the bottom of the Earth Weekly issue 13 newsletter, there was one extra news item that I thought, it's just a small one, but is a bit exciting in the building blocks of future climate legislation.
Yes.
And that was the release of Vanuatu's final text of a resolution that will be put to a vote at the United Nations General Assembly later this month. So this is an important step in moving forward the International Court of Justice advisory opinion that came out last year. And this is where the General Assembly will vote as to whether or not this resolution is passed. And it's a very succinct document that details the key aspects of the advisory opinion and calls on the states to agree to move it forward. So it's an interesting and important building block.
It is. It'll be later this month. It will be very exciting. So, yes, circle May 20 in your calendars. And Vanuatu led the way in securing that original legal opinion. And now it's leading the way in maximising the impact of that opinion. And, I'm not a lawyer. I don't really understand exactly what's being asked for in that document. But I'm sure they've put things in there that are designed over time, or over a fairly short time, to advance and magnify the impact of that decision.
2 of the things in there that stood out to me. One was sort of affirming that if you do lose an element of your country because of, say, sea level rise, it's still a country. It doesn't necessarily entail the loss of its statehood. And then secondly, that we have an obligation where you can't, if there's a real risk of irreparable harm to a human life, you can't return someone to their country of origin forcefully, which seems to put building blocks in for climate displacement rights.
That's it for today. 2 more people are crucial to making this podcast happen. Sophie Sedaris and the co-founder of the Earth News Service, Chris Dancy. To find out more about what we talked about today and other news of the week, check out the Earth newsletter at earthed.au. And if you support the Earth newsletter, you're also supporting this podcast. If you're enjoying this pod, there's something we'd like you to do to help spread the word about it. Please share it with a friend, a colleague, or your network. And give us some stars on your pod listening platform. When Spotify and Apple see stars, they're more likely to put our pod in front of other people. See you next Tuesday.
See you later.